I mean, this is really quite extraordinary. There are so few places in the world where you can really still do this.
The Harz, central Germany. The picturesque and rugged scenery of this mountain range has long been closely associated with European folklore and ancient pagan rituals.
The Harz is at the epicenter of that dark, magical aspect of German storytelling.
It's very much a land where, myth and folklore can flourish.
But if you look behind the myths and legends of the mountain, you'll discover a very special steam railway cutting through its landscape.
A trip along the Harz is actually a trip through Germany's story and its history.
In this episode, we'll see how the history of this little-known train line charts the incredible story of Germany itself.
Because it tells eloquently the story of modern Germany, from unification when it was first built in the late 1800s, through World War II and on into the Cold War.
This is the Harz Mountain Railway, and here is its hidden story. In this series, we explore some of the greatest railways in the world and the secrets surrounding them. From the ancient hills of Europe to the wastes of the Yukon Valley in North America, their dark and forgotten pasts have left their mark on history. Every day, deep in the heart of modern Germany, ordinary people make an extraordinary journey. On a steam railway that runs a daily schedule serving a network of towns and villages in a central highlands area of the country known as the Harz.
The Harz Railway is utterly unique because it's the largest steam network in Europe, and also it's not a heritage railway, it's a working, functioning railway that the local people use.
It is basically a mecca for steam railway enthusiasts the world over. It's probably on many rail enthusiasts' bucket lists.
If you're taking that train ride on the Harz Mountain Railway, don't just look at it as a picturesque train journey. In fact, you're on a journey through history and time.
The Harz narrow-gauge railway network comprises of 3 lines. The Transharz, running from Nordhausen to Wernigerode, the Selke Valley, running from Quedlinburg to Hasselfeld, and the Brocken, starting at Dryen-en-Hoorn station and making its way to the summit of the Brocken mountain, the region's highest peak. All of which are serviced by the network's incredible fleet of vintage trains.
The railway today runs almost entirely original rolling stock and locomotives. You've got stock from the 1950s, even the 1930s, and they're used day in, day out because they're so perfect for the line. They were built specifically for it, and they are suited so well.
With up to 15 vintage locomotives still in daily use, the Harz is one of the busiest steam railways on Earth. A remarkable fact, considering Germany is home to some of the most state-of-the-art train networks in the world.
The real question is, in the modern world, how is it that this steam railway is still here?
The answer lies within the history of Germany itself. From its rebirth as an international superpower, through to its dark and turbulent years that ultimately resulted in the divide of a country and its people.
You can go all the way back to 1841 and look at the words of an economist like Friedrich List, who was saying at that very time that railways needed to be built if all these states that would comprise Germany would literally be linked together. And that's what the railways would do.
The newly formed Germany required a vast train network that would enable the country to both unite and expand. It needed to be able to transport its people and goods across the nation.
In many ways, it was the railways that helped weld Germany together as a new country.
The Harz in central Germany was an area rich with minerals and natural resources, ready to be exploited.
The whole network was built between 1880 and 1905. It was built because the rising tourism in this time and because of the rising industry in the Harz Mountains.
And it played a critical role in bringing the country together, in connecting raw materials, consumers, industry, and people.
But the terrain was steep and unforgiving. Standard trains would have proved ineffective. So the engineers decided to employ a different track system specifically for this area.
If you've got bottomless pockets, engineering can make it happen. We could have put broad gauge through that mountain system, but part of the dream of this railway was that fairy tale up in the Harz Mountains, and to remove too much of that environment would have spoiled why the railway was being built in the first place.
The clue as to why the engineers of the Harz Mountain Railway chose a narrow gauge actually is in its name, Mountain Railway. Now, a narrow gauge is so much better for negotiating treacherous mountain terrain as a narrow gauge rather than a standard gauge, because if you've got a narrow gauge, it can go in much tighter corners. You can occupy a far smaller space. If you're blasting dynamite through hills and mountains and building tunnels, your trains are smaller. There are narrower curves and corners. It's a much more economical railway to build.
Because of these tight turns along the track, the train's wagons and carriages needed to be able to maintain stability on both the straight and curved sections of the line.
When you're looking at railways, everybody gets very excited about the locos. But on this railway system, you also have to think about the carriages. They're all on individual bogies. So that means that when you're going up on these very, very tight turns in this mountainous environment, the front and the back end of the carriage can move slightly independently, and they can take those tight corners on these tortuous curves.
The towns and villages served by this railway also hold a particularly special place in Germany's national identity. Quedlinburg is often referred to as the cradle of Germany. Its majestic abbey was once the seat of Henry the Fowler, a nobleman who is considered by many to be the first king of Germany, after uniting the warring Germanic tribes in the 10th century. To this day, the surrounding areas remain steeped in the country's myths, legends, and traditional folklore, making it a place of interest for those wishing to explore the darker side of the Harz Mountains.
The Harz region has a deep connection into the subconscious and imagination of German people.
All those famous fairy tales, by the Brothers Grimm, you think of Hansel and Gretel, Little Red Riding Hood, all told throughout Europe and indeed throughout the world. But a lot of these stories originate in Germany, and they originate from mountains, from deep, dark forests.
The Harz is at the epicenter of that dark, magical aspect of German storytelling.
It's very much a land where, myth and folklore can flourish. The Germans today still love this, and actually a lot of us like Germany for that reason.
The main reason for the Harz being a central point for folklore, paganism, and witchcraft is due to the region's highest peak, the Brocken. Its mystical landscape has inspired some of Germany's most culturally influential people, such as Wagner, the Brothers Grimm, and the celebrated German writer, Goethe.
Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, who of course holds a place in German literature and German culture, very similar to Shakespeare. His central work is the Faust legend.
In Goethe's play, the central character, Faust, unhappy and disillusioned with his life, makes a pact with the devil in order to receive unlimited knowledge and earthly pleasures.
Essentially, this seemed to find some sort of echo in Germany, this idea of the conflict between good and evil, and of essentially a good man selling his soul to the devil.
Sabine Huben is a local guide from the Harz area. She has come to a place called Walpurgis Hall, in an area known locally as the Witches' Dance Floor.
So here we are in Walpurgis Hall. It's a place that is decorated with paintings of scenes from Goethe's book Faust, Dr. Faustus. This shadowy figure, that is obviously, this is the devil. This is Satan, this is Mephisto, whatever you might call him, dancing with one of the witches. You have the big shadow coming up through the fire. You've got, of course, a black cat always coming along with witches, and they probably cooking some potion.
The painting takes inspiration from Faust, illustrating a scene that takes place on the Brocken mountain, known as Hexennacht, or simply Witches' Night.
And in this Faust story, he made these tales of the witches part of the literature. And from that point on, everybody said, we have to go to the Brocken because Goethe wrote so much on the witches, we have to go to the Witches' Mountain, the Brocken.
The Brocken mountain itself is steeped in mysteries. For centuries, it's been one of the epicenters of devil worship, Satanism, and the darker sides of paganism. But all of that is encapsulated and coalesces on the Brocken, which is the center of it.
Visiting the Brocken became a cultural pilgrimage for many Germans, and the new steam railway now made it accessible to everyone. Train enthusiast Tim Dunn has come to the Harz Railway to take the same historic journey that has been made by countless German citizens for over 100 years.
This is one of the largest narrow-gauge locomotives in the world. And it can take 6 carriages up a hill. And there are 17 of these things. I mean, this is really quite extraordinary. There are so few places in the world where you can really still do this. So hang on to the end of a balcony on the end of a train and sit there going along by a mountain. I mean, this engine, which is one of the original engines built for this line, is taking us along now, and you can just feel the power of this thing in front of us. You know, this is magnificent. You never get a chance to do this. It's such an unusual place to do it as well.
It's not just notable because it's so high, but also because it's the centre of all the kind of pagan associations, the magic, the supernatural phenomena. So it's a really special place in the middle of an even bigger, equally special place.
Full pelts. That is chuffing lovely.
They built the Harz railway system as a fairy tale. It was part of the folklore of Germany at the time, a way of bringing the nation together with its dreams and its aspirations. But we all know that fairy stories quite often have a really dark, nasty undertone, and I'm afraid that part of this railway story isn't so pleasant.
The Harz Mountains, and in particular the Brocken, came to represent all that was great and good about Germany: freedom, national pride, and above all, unity. But all of that was soon to change. The rise of the Nazi Party in the 1930s would transform the region from a peaceful symbol of hope to a place of suffering and despair. Nordhausen has the honor of being the very first station on the Harz Railway. From this depot, you can connect to all other lines on the narrow-gauge steam network. But less than 100 meters from this station is another train line that tells of a much darker time in the region's history.
We are at the remains of a bridge. This bridge belonged to the so-called Helmetalbahn. This forgotten train line, which was never completed, was rediscovered during the 90s after the reunification.
Construction of the Helmets Valley Line started in 1944, with the use of forced labor from the nearby concentration camp at Nordhausen, Mittelbau-Dora. The Nazis had ordered the prisoners to lay the standard gauge track at high speed in order to relieve the buildup of rail traffic on the main line.
Construction on the Helmetalbahn started in early summer 1944, and it was meant to relieve the railway line between Nordhausen and Nordheim. There was a regular Reichsbahn line, which was seriously overburdened by the arms industry.
The route to Nordhausen on the Southern Harz railway line had become the most densely travelled connection in the whole of Germany. This was because Nordhausen had been chosen as the site of a top-secret Nazi weapons program.
The V2 rocket, in Hitler's mind, was going to be a game changer. This was a rocket that was going to fly at 6 to 7 times the speed of sound. It was going to land on enemy cities and obliterate them. It was going to be the weapon that was going to win the war for Hitler.
The ultimate purpose of the V rockets was a war-winning secret weapon. It could do damage which conventional bombers could not do at much less cost. The V1s were pilotless aircraft, rather like today's drones, and the V2s were rockets, and they could be launched from a great distance away, from bases hundreds of miles from their targets, hitting, as it were, from out of a blue sky, a city, and inflicting huge damage, much, much more than a conventional bomber fleet could do.
These devastating rocket-launched missiles were originally being manufactured at a site in Peenemünde on the Baltic coast. But heavy Allied bombing raids in 1943 forced the Nazis to look for a new location to produce the V2s.
Where better than the Harz Mountains? It was the perfect place to assemble this deadly new weapon.
Being rich in natural minerals, the Harz was littered with mines that stretched deep into the landscape. An ideal place to build a factory safe from Allied bombs. Konstein Hill in Nordhausen was chosen as the location for the new V2 rocket facility. Its previous use as a gypsum mine had created an underground network of secure tunnels and chambers. But it was still, nevertheless, a mine. And turning it into a factory was going to require a great deal of labor. To meet this need, the Nazi High Command decided to establish a labor camp, where inmates were forced to work in the most inhumane conditions imaginable.
Mittelbau-Dora was one of the most atrocious places in the whole of Nazi Germany in the Second World War. It was a place where inmates from all over Europe were literally worked to death. And in fact, 20,000 people died in Mittelbau-Dora during the making of the V2 rocket.
Even by World War II German labour camp standards, the conditions were notoriously horrific. Punishments, hangings, brutality, starvation, it was a world of nightmares.
Many of the prisoners who were forced to enter these tunnels never saw daylight again.
What you see behind is one of the places where the prisoners had their housing. About 2,000 to 3,000 prisoners were housed. They shared everything, so medical conditions were horrible. You had lice everywhere, no toilets, no shower, nothing. So the mortality rate was very high.
Stefan Hordler is a historian and the curator of what is now a memorial site to the thousands of prisoners forced to work within this vast, top-secret facility.
This model represents the full construction site that was underground. In total, this complex had a length of about 20 kilometers. The part you see here from the south until there is connected to the Dora concentration camp. The concentration camp prisoners had to go into every area, lower the level, widen it, go deep into the mountain, and prepare it for the machines that were brought in to produce the V2 and at the very end also the V1.
The slave labourers might have been safe from Allied bombings and Allied observation. They certainly were not safe from other fatal perils. They suffered from lung diseases. They were working like moles in conditions of damp and blackness and extreme cold and heat. And so they were literally worked to death, many of them.
And of course, the awful irony is that more people died making the V2 than were actually killed by the V2. So you get a sense there of quite how murderous this place was.
An estimated 60,000 prisoners were used in the construction and maintenance of Mittelbau. But production came to a halt in 1945 as the Allies began to close in on the Harz area.
The construction of this railway line was never completed because the war was lost for Germany. The end of the war came quicker than the completion of the construction.
Dora was eventually liberated by the Allied troops, and the remaining prisoners were given care and medical treatment.
Very few of the scientists who managed, ran and were responsible for the V2 facility in the Harz were ever put on trial. If they were willing to work for the West, they were spirited away into Allied programs developing rocketry, hopefully faster than the Soviets could.
And by the end of May 1945, people across Europe were celebrating VE Day. But the end of the World War was also the beginning of the Cold War. And a difficult road lay ahead for the narrow-gauge railway.
When the Second World War ended, half of Europe disappeared behind the Iron Curtain, which divided Europe between the Free West and the Soviet East. And Germany was right in the middle of that division. Germany was a divided country.
The Harz Mountains, this beautiful area of countryside, this legendary place, was itself divided. So this dividing line ran through the very soul of Germany.
The iconic Harz landscape, along with the towns and villages within, was split in two. But surprisingly, it was this act that helped to preserve both the network and its rolling stock. The company operating the railway was based in Eastern Germany, officially known as the German Democratic Republic. During a time when money, resources, and spare parts were hard to come by,
Both German states had a very different economical systems, and the people in the East urgently need trains because they hadn't enough cars. The people needed railways, buses, and public services to get from one place to another.
Without the ability to purchase the latest locomotive technology, they had to be resourceful. When it was possible, the trains would be repaired. And when it was not, they would be remade, using the original designs from the 1930s.
One of the things that makes this railway system so unique is that it's not actually had much of a break-in service. So it's not about conserving or doing up something you found in a scrapyard. It's been about maintaining what was already there. And the current rolling stock is still going strong. Well, it's been there since the 1950s. And it's still there, moving people around, just as it was 100 years ago.
Tim Dunn has been invited to the Wernigerode depot, where the majority of the maintenance takes place.
The oldest machine was built in 1897.
Wow, and that's still here?
It's still here in operation. There's another old machine built in 1931. It's a very powerful machine, and it's called the Mama. Big Mama, because this machine is a prototype of our new machines built in the 50s. We have about 17 machines from the kind of type, and they are operating up to the Brocken because they are the most powerful machines we have.
Keeping the locomotives maintained and operational was of the utmost importance. And it was for this reason that the drivers operating the trains on the Harz narrow gauge railway were also skilled engineers. A practice that is continued to this day by people like Dirk Gunther, a driver and also chairman of the network's Preservation Society.
Was ist das? Was is here?
What's this? What's going on here? It's an unscheduled repair due to damage to the ash pan. The rear axles have come off, and then you can see everything. The three axles, for example, you can see cracks in the frame, the axles, and things like that. It's a pity, of course, because it's an unplanned outage and she won't be available for work for a fortnight. And that's naturally the downside to it.
The majority of the steam locomotives in use here are 210-2s, a term used to represent the unique wheel arrangement employed on the line.
That means it has 2 wheels at the front, 10 driving wheels and 2 on the tender at the back. And that gives it a massive traction to get it up these very, very steep gradients.
Operating these powerful machines safely and effectively means that the driver must be perfectly in tune with their locomotive. All of the drivers here started as apprentices, learning from the ground up and honing their skills, such as Horst Dittmann, one of the network's former drivers.
I came to the railway more by chance, and I developed a real passion, especially for the steam engine. It was a lot of fun, even as a stoker, watching the driver over his shoulder to get to know the trade. So my ambition was, of course, to become an engine driver. To me, this engine I operate is alive. I feel what I operate, the power of the machine.
Horst was an East German, working on the line from Wernigerode to Nordhausen, a vital service for those living on the eastern side. But due to its proximity to the border, the East German police kept a close eye on what happened both in and around the train network.
I once had an experience during the GDR times. When arriving at a station in my train, on the track next to me, there was an engine from the west.
Both the locomotive and its driver were from West Germany, and under GDR law, Horst was forbidden from having any form of contact with citizens from across the border. Despite this, when the West German driver said hello, Horst responded in kind.
I greeted him back, of course. Then, when I got out on the platform, there was the station commander of the border troops. He said to me, "You know that any contact with federal German citizens is prohibited." I replied, "I don't know what upbringing you had, but my parents told me that when someone greets you, you do the same." And that's what I did.
Dann habe ich das zu erwidern. Das habe ich getan.
In a time when punishments for breaking the rules could be very severe, Horst was lucky not to have had any further action taken against him.
The Stasi was notorious for the thoroughness and the viciousness of its punishments. In addition to the usual prison, torture, disappearing, murder, they had a particular punishment called Zersetzung, which translates as something like biodegrading or decomposition. And that was the complete erosion of someone's life. They would work specifically to destroy your job, your family, your relationships, until there was nothing left of you.
In East Germany, with typical German thoroughness, the police state, the secret police state, was brought, if you like, to its most perfect form, in that the Stasi, the secret police of the German Democratic Republic of East Germany, had a watching brief over every single citizen.
Horst continued with his work on the trains and was even tasked with delivering coal to the Brocken. It was destined for the Russian troops and members of the Stasi stationed in the barracks at the peak of the mountain. But what were they doing there, in the remote surroundings of the Harz? Jürgen Steinmeck was one of only a handful of drivers given permission to operate the trains at the summit of the Brocken. Such was the secrecy surrounding the Stasi activities there. Jürgen had to be carefully vetted to ensure he was not a security risk.
They didn't ask or tell you you could drive up here. You just had to do it. Because I met all the criteria, I was married, had children, and had taken the oath to the state. I had to do it. It wasn't possible to contact the Russian soldiers. I wouldn't say they were locked in, but they were inside the buildings. And they watched to see. They didn't come out of the building and make official contact with us.
The Stasi had good reason for wanting to keep what they were doing quiet, because they had turned the Brocken into a top-secret listening station, with the capability of spying across not just East Germany, but also the whole of the West, and even further.
The whole area of the Brocken became a military-restricted area in August 1961, when the Berlin Wall has been built, and nobody of the common people was allowed to come here.
Christoph Lampert is the director here at Brocken House Museum.
Right now, we're in the middle of the dome that belongs to the old headquarters of the Secret Service of the former GDR. And the Stasi, they were able to listen to every radio, news, telephone calls broadcasted from Western Germany to West Berlin and back. Yeah, the Secret Service of the GDR had a very, very big range. They were able to listen over the English Channel right to Britain and right to Scotland. And in southwestern direction, they were able to listen right to the border of Spain. So that was a very, very big range considering the 80s.
It was said that working in the remote bleakness of the mountain, unable to communicate with anyone from the outside for months on end, tested even the most loyal soldiers and Stasi agents. Even at the bottom of the Brocken, along the railway lines and security blockades, many employees of the GDR, such as Dietmar Schultke, were dreaming of a life elsewhere.
We stay here at the borderline between East and West Germany, and that is the last place in former East Germany, and behind this territory starts West Germany.
Dietmar joined the GDR army in 1987. He was specially selected for the position of border guard due to the fact he had no relatives living in the West.
So here I stay at the first fence, and that was my job as a soldier with my partner to control the fence. I have statistics, 100 refugees in the 80s, maybe 3 can cross the border. 97 go into the prison.
As a dog handler, he was tasked with keeping the West Germans out and the East Germans in, even if necessary, by use of deadly force.
It's not a good feeling because you have Kalashnikov with 60 shots. Must stay with my captain at this watchtower maybe 8 hours every day and look for the refugees.
In the GDR times, there were no official maps of the Harz or the Brocken region, so anyone attempting to illegally cross the border would have to use landmarks for directions.
Here we are at the railway line nearby the first fence, and people trying to escape need a way to come to the border, and they use the railway line.
Many citizens of the GDR were desperate to flee the harsh and restrictive conditions of the East. Some for economic or political reasons, others simply to be reunited with family, friends, and loved ones. Even Dietmar was hiding a secret.
When I was offered the position, I had a dream to go from East to West Germany to escape, because I thinking to my girlfriend in New York City, and I want to meet her, and I want to live in freedom. That was the reason.
For Dietmar to escape to the West, he would have needed help. But life in the GDR was such that no one really knew who they could trust.
The Stasi was also a part of the border system. In my company, we are maybe more than 100 soldiers, and every 10th soldier was a spy for the Stasi.
It's estimated that the Stasi had one agent for every 166 people in East Germany. But if you count all the informants who were made to work with the Stasi, the number's more like 1 in 12.
For those like Dietmar, longing for a free and unified Germany, they would soon get their wish.
If you seek liberalization, come here to this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, open this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
As the East German government started to falter, the fall of the Berlin Wall signaled the beginning of the reunification of Germany. By 1990, the country and its people were once again united.
And November 9th, 1989, the day the Berlin Wall came tumbling down and the beginning of the end of the Soviet Empire. Within 2 years, East and West Germany were reunited, in many ways coming full circle and ending what World War II had produced.
But the fall of the government in the East had its consequences. Economic turmoil meant an uncertain future for the previously state-owned narrow-gauge steam railway.
After the reunification, they had a lot of problems. The German National Railway and the GDR didn't want to have the narrow gauge any longer. They want to sell it or close it or anything. So the main problem was how to preserve the whole network.
But in 1991, the people united once again. This time, forming a society to repair and maintain the railway that had come to represent the heart and soul of Germany.
Communities and districts sit along our network. They try to find a way to preserve the whole network. Not only the Brocken line, which was interesting for private investors to earn money. They had the aim to preserve the whole network, and so they founded out a private community company.
In 1993, they took over the running of the steam railway itself, making it the first ever non-state-run railway in West Germany, operating a regular service for passengers and goods.
It was the first company owned by communities, districts and cities. So nowadays it's also unique because it's the only one who operates like that. The history has been different. The whole network of the Harz narrow gauge was situated in the western part of Germany. I don't think that the whole network would exist today.
The Harz Mountain system, due to politics and the Cold War, has a perfectly conserved railway system, not a preserved one or a rebuilt one. It has the real deal.
Every year, an estimated 1.1 million passengers continue to use the railway, either as a daily commute for the locals or as a means for the huge number of tourists to take in the breathtaking views from the region's highest and most famous point.
In what is already regarded as a special area, the Harz Mountains, the Brocken is the centre of it all. It is the most special place. Every German knows the Brocken.
So we have a saying that the Brocken mountain is a German. These high mountains, they are always symbols of feelings for nation building. And so you can say the Brocken mountain is a German. So the idea that the German unity has something to do with this Brocken, that is correct. So I think that the Brocken Railway is really part of this story.
Against the odds, this railway has managed to survive through a century burdened by war, civil unrest, and economic hardship, continuously transporting people and goods across a region that has come to mean so much to the people of Germany. And it's for that very reason that the Harz narrow gauge steam railway truly is one of the greatest railways in the world.